it's time for prize fighters, circus freaks, and gangsters.
The podcast where we try not to be shocked, but we fail miserably.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greta.
Today we are talking about Warrior Season 1, Episode 4, The White Mountain. We are super pumped, and let's get into it.
So not so much fighting in this one, but a lot of intrigue and just straight up viciousness.
So much viciousness, and we get to see the Dragon Lady emerge.
Oh boy, yeah. But this episode starts out dark, and by dark I mean I had to go around, turn off all the lights, pull down my curtains so I could just see what the hell was going on to begin with. But yeah, so we're in the dark, and you had asked about what game. That's just straight up roulette that he's playing.
It is. I just never. He's playing it on a slate, and you know that it looks like a slate with red and black on it. I just had never seen that set up before, and I was very confused by it. But then I went down a whole rabbit hole. Apparently, gambling was the pastime in San Francisco at this time. Everybody there, just being there was a gamble because they had to make this trek across the country when it was a mess to do so. And so they were all gamblers to begin with. And then when they got there, they just continued gambling, which is why you have all these tales of fortunes won and lost. But they gambled incessantly, and it was obsessive. So they had so many weird games that I've never heard of. But one that kept popping up was Monty. Monty was like the big thing, and it came from Spain, and it's played with a different deck of cards. So you take out a 52 card deck, and then you remove the 10s, the 9s, and one other card, I think the jacks. So it's a smaller deck. But it's
okay, so that's why they are always specifying 3-card Monty. Like, okay, clearly there was like 40-card Monty or something.
Yeah, so it comes from Monty Bank, which Mountebank is the name for a charlatan, and a charlatan was a snake oil salesman at the time. So all of these things are so intertwined. But Monty or Mountebank or Spanish Monty, whatever it was called, was the national card game of Mexico.
Oh, all of these things new to me. I mean, they talk about, they complain about kids these days, people these days, they spend all their time on their phones playing the Candy Crush or whatever. It's like, look, compared to what people used to get up to when they had time on their hands, maybe a little Candy Crush ain't so bad.
Well, you know what? I'm going to mount my bank here and just say I find the amount of post-COVID online gambling just to be distressing. And so I think you might want to roll back some of your comments there. But maybe 3 years ago you could make that statement, but now with Jamie Foxx telling people it's okay to gamble during weddings on your phone, I don't know. Maybe we've gone a bit far.
I mean, it was one thing when, you'd all get together and you'd like pool your money for a single game or maybe March Madness, and everybody was out 20, 100, maybe a couple $100 for entire games. But now they're doing like these in-game tiny bets, which that's insidious and downright the most banal of all evils. I think that is just the worst.
It's just they're just stealing from children, basically. They're not stealing from adults. They're stealing from the children of those adults.
Absolutely. And this whole thing where they're like, oh, make a $5 bet and then you get $200. When they go into what that means, it's like, oh, sure, all they're doing is giving you $200 worth of bets spread over, I don't know, 50 bets. And so you actually, for that $200, they're automatically getting $1,000 back from you or something. I mean, the whole thing is just disgusting. And there's going to be so much damage done here.
It's like selling a crack rock at a loss just so that you can get somebody hooked. So that, you know what I mean? Like you sell a little bit cheap so that you can make a lot on the back end. And they do the same thing with gambling. But apparently people were ruining their lives with gambling, as we can see in Warrior here. So again, the parallels between the past and the present are, I mean, we've learned nothing. We've learned absolutely nothing. But we see our degenerate gambler cop is he is the opener to this. And God, he is just distressing from start to end.
Oh my goodness. I mean, if there is any argument right there that birth control also benefits men, the dude can't even remember how many kids he has, and he just wants to get out of the damn house.
That guy just wants to die. I'm sure every time he catches a beating, he's like, how did I live through that? Son of a bitch.
Yeah, and speaking of beatings, he gets one at the beginning of this not because he was late on paying up his marker, the very fact that he had one. And so the Feng Hai, the guys who own this casino, are like, yeah, we're just going to give you a little taste so you know how bad it'll get if you Welsh on us.
Except they didn't send one of the Feng Hai. They sent an Irish enforcer from a different pub because a Chinese person can't lay hands on a white man. So they paid the biggest Irishman in the city. And man, this man looks mean. He basically looks like O'Leary when O'Leary turned 60 and has been an undertaker for 10 years. Right?
I mean, that was the thing. Jack Damon used to be a San Francisco cop, but he's like, you know what? The money's better with the Pinkertons. So he went to Chicago to be a Pinkerton detective. And while as much as he loved wailing on strikers and stuff, dude, Chicago, too cold. Wanted to come back into San Francisco.
It's got lovely weather, especially in a time with no climate control housing, which just to me,
God.
Just kill me. Just kill me. I don't want to live in that. If we have some kind of an apocalypse and there's zombies running, everybody's like, oh, I'd do this and that. I would go wherever there's air conditioning, and when air conditioning fails, I'll kill myself. That's it. I don't want any part of it.
But regardless, Bill is having a bad time. And it looks like Mr. Lee, our Georgia jawline.
Oh, and he catches a beating with a shillelagh, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he catches a full-blown Irish ass whipping. And, he looks rough the next day. He has to have Lee put his socks on for him.
Yeah.
Because he got beat so bad.
And his wife knows that it wasn't any police work he was up to. But again, she's got 5 children. And
she's the literal stereotype of the long-suffering Irish, battered housewife.
Yeah, and she also doesn't, she's in a position where, okay, great, if I leave him or if he dies, which is what she's probably more worried about, she's got 5 kids. She can literally not go to work.
We think. She's got 5 kids we know about.
Yeah.
They seem to be multiplying. They're like gremlins. She better not feed them after dark.
Okay. Nice one there. So, yeah, life is not so great at the O'Hara place, but then we get to see where Assam is spending his time and how he's eating. And this was one of the first Chinese food scenes that we get to see. And I was so thrilled because it was so on point.
So what was your favorite part about this food scene? Because I was focused on the Feng Hai eating scene. So tell me what you're thinking of.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. When we get to the Feng Hai eating scene, that one's great too. But this one, so they're at breakfast. And so they've got the big giant pot, and that had congee in it. That's that sort of soupy rice. And then clearly they had some sort of toppings. They didn't show what they were. Doesn't matter. They had the iron teapot that had the hot water in it, and then they had the regular teapot. So you could tell that they had tea at the table along with their soup because they had the covered dishes on it. But then they were also drinking booze at breakfast.
Right. Everybody was drinking booze at breakfast at that point, insofar as I understand it.
But it was so cool because you could see it because they had the regular sort of hand-sized teacups, but then they had those itty-wee-tee.
Yeah, the teeny tiny ones.
Yeah, and he
sake cups.
And he shoots it back and puts it on the table before he got up and left. And I was just like,
I don't even think I realized they were eating breakfast at that point. Because I remember distinctly him doing the shot, and I don't think it dawned on me oh yeah, that's a little eye opener right there.
Well, remember, Assam's kind of struggling in because his ribs are killing him.
Oh yeah, he wants to be drunk. He absolutely wants to be drunk because he took a beating. But we find out in that scene that the beating that he took wasn't as bad as the one Young Jun took.
Exactly.
Yeah, his dad beat him harder because he couldn't show any favoritism.
Oh, and we get a little bit of Bolo's backstory, too, that when you talk about people entertaining themselves with gambling in San Francisco, when you're out on the railroad working there were no gambling facilities per se, but there was a fight scene. And Bolo got yanked off the line just doing, regular hard labor to go, like, kill dudes?
Yeah, and that was, I will say, this is a very historically inaccurate scene. They show the two of them pit fighting in a literal pit that's, like, filled with water to the knee, and it is... he's fighting, so it's a Chinese immigrant, an unnamed Chinese immigrant fighting, he's this demon, and he's fighting this big dark-skinned guy, and so it's two people whose lives are utterly worthless fighting it out in this pit. And so we're given to believe, well, he kills him in the scene, but in, just for reference, even in the slave-owning South, they did not have fights to the death because they were just squandering an investment. Yeah. Especially when it was an investment on like a big ass husky dude who's a badass fighter, or say a field hand that you pulled out and you want to fight. You don't want to squander that investment. It's just like gladiators. You don't want those people to die. You need them to stay alive. A lot of times.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I was just like, wait, these are like two of your biggest dudes doing like the work of three regular men, and wait, what?
Yeah. So that it just doesn't make any sense. And the way that they did fight was a mixture of comical and distressing. I mean, no, the whole thing is awful, but like they would have these bizarre fights. Like they would put maybe 10 slaves into a ring and blindfold them with boxing gloves on, and then bet on who would win and have them all box. And then they would give like the winner like $2 or $5. It wasn't a great amount of money, but it was something. You know what I mean? And so they would do stuff like that. Or if it was a single combat, there was a big thing where like a way to resolve conflicts in Western Africa, they would butt. It was called butting. And so I guess it was just like goats, and they would get on all fours and bash their heads into one another until somebody quit. The Irish had their own version of that where they would kick each other in the shins.
Okay, so there's sort of a ritual combat element to it. Like there's a very definite endpoint.
And it was to avoid grievous injury or death. Like the point of it was to avoid those things, not to cause them.
Yeah, which makes way more sense, because if you're betting on something, you're betting on the outcome, and if everybody agrees what the outcome you're looking for is, then, and I mean, people are dying enough just like from starvation and dehydration, and getting rid of those bodies is a pain, but at least those were little tiny guys having to deal with.
Right, and if you have two great fighters and one of them wins, you want to see a rematch. I mean, people want to see rematches. This is why boxing promotions exist. So the whole thing's ass.
Okay.
But
that makes me feel a little bit better, but it also sort of makes a lot more sense of the development of modern theatrical wrestling. I know it's real, sorry, but
I could go into that in great detail too. Now, wrestling at this time was a vicious nightmare. It was it was a lot of eye gouging and small joint manipulation. Breaking fingers was a very big part of it because you were just trying to get the other person to quit.
Right.
See, it was horrible. They were eye gouging and fish hooking and doing all kinds of nastiness.
Yeah, and that's not good for, if you're putting a show like 3 shows a weekend in a town and moving on, taking out your players. Yeah, that's bad news.
Well, they were wrestling people from the crowd a lot of times. Like they would put on a show against like another performer where they would go like 85% or something like that because they didn't want anybody to die. And, that was another thing. In the scene where they're fighting indoors, you see them fighting on a rug. They would have been fighting on a much thicker rug, like a pile rug.
Okay.
Because They had, and I learned this just in passing, that they had Olympic wrestling rugs. So in the Olympics, they had these really, really thick rugs. I guess they would get from Turkey and stuff like that because they had a tradition of wrestling on rugs.
Yeah.
And so that's what they would have been using. They wouldn't have been fighting on a thin rug. It would have been thicker to provide more padding, or piled rugs.
Yeah, and the fight scene you're talking about on the rug, I was thinking, oh boy, I do not want to go into training with Sifu Liang, because he was merciless.
Oh yeah,
Because it was Mai Ling. She's looking for some new fighters, and Liang's putting them through their paces. He's like, these guys are trash.
Well, I think he was testing them out to see if they could fight, because
Right.
she came down and she was like, I thought we ordered killers, and he just had mangled all these people, and
then the one guy runs away.
yeah, just drops his knife and runs away. Yeah, but boy, he's a bad man, and like I said, it keeps setting up that glorious fight we see coming up with Assam.
Yeah, though I think Lee Young and Bolo going one-on-one, that would be a show as well.
Yes.
Yeah, because Bolo, he was the yellow demon, and, he fights for Hop Wei, and Li Yong fights for Long Zi, so...
Yeah, and he's got that whole Buddhist monk gimmick, where he's always, got a slight smile, and he's very quiet, and then he just pops out and cuts your head off, or whatever. I love that man.
Okay, but let's get back to the other intrigue. You've got Buckley and Chief Flanagan. They are both so mad at the mayor right now, because he hasn't specifically called out the Chinese, but both of them have access to grind against the Chinese. So they're like, yeah, we got to do some damage, but we got to do plausible deniability. The amount of wink, wink, nudge, nudge going on between these two in the office was just wild.
It was. And I have got to say, I tip the cap. I don't know if you watch It's Always Sunny, but I love it. And those guys are all accomplished actors now, but Mac on the show can't act worth a shit and admits it. And he said that in order for him to limp, at least kind of convincingly, he had to put big-ass rocks in his shoe.
Oh, okay.
And just actually made himself limp. But Buckley, that man is acting himself into Oscars. I mean, I am in pain watching him move. It's insane. I've never seen anyone act so well on an injury, because it's hard to pretend to be injured, but he conveys that his whole body is clenched, as he moves.
Right.
Because his leg is hurting him so badly. It is amazing. I'm just so impressed by that man's acting.
Oh, yeah, and you can see that the amount of pain that he's in just makes him a bitter, terrible human being that just wants to inflict pain on other people. And so he hands...
That actor's name is Langley Kirkwood, by the way,
okay.
And he's a triathlete.
Oh, okay. So I'm sure he knows from a little joint pain here and there.
And he's probably run himself till his feet are bloody, so he knows how to limp convincingly.
So Buckley hands Chief Flanagan the secret piece of paper to go mess up some Chinese, and we run around the city a little bit more, and we find out what else Assam is doing instead of taking Advil for his ribs.
That scene is a really nice callback, by the way, to Gangs of New York. It is the same exact scene as when Boss Tweed is giving the order to just go round some people up. I mean, it's the same scene. It's the same exact scene with different actors in it. Did you notice that?
Yeah, and it's very much how things went.
That's just the way shit happened back then. It's wild.
Yeah, things are getting out of control. We need to make people cool it off because they'd be afraid of getting busted up. So yeah, go put the cool on some people.
Yeah, in law school, we actually learned that there's a difference between Soviet and U.S. legal theory, and it's explained really well in the Boss Tweed thing and this scene, where there is a difference between, or you can achieve the same goal by having a show trial and punishing someone, so there is the appearance of justice served, as actually serving justice. And that's what we're seeing here, where instead the people are mad, they want to see justice done, so go do some nebulous justice.
Right.
Just go round some people up and make it look like justice. And it's kind of it's sad to see that in American history. I thought that was purely a Soviet thing, but apparently not.
Having that sort of justice, it's definitely a more sophisticated way of looking at the world, and being willing to have people under your sway look more like idiots more of the time instead of pretending we're better than that. I don't know.
Yeah, it is an odd tactic though, because at some point you're going to get caught out for doing the easy, dumb, and wrong shit rather than the thing you said you were going to do.
Yeah, and sort of pre-planning how people are going to be always causes more problems than it solves.
Which I think sets up what's going on in this really nicely, because Buckley is creating his own problems here. He is.
Oh yeah.
God, that man is so in his own way.
That is a great way of putting it.
Good Lord. I don't even understand his motivations other than, like a Russian would be. He's just evil. He's just doing it in the furtherance of evil.
Well, again, that man has been in pain for a long time. He's messing with his head.
Yeah.
But Assam doesn't want to be in pain. So, and Youngjun doesn't want Assam to be in pain either. I mean, Youngjun, I think, has been looking for a friend for a real long time. And so he does Assam a solid and mixes up some opium and tobacco for him.
I think it's probably been difficult for him to find an equal too, because he's his father's son, so he can't really mess with his underlings too much, and then the one guy who can fight as well as him is a complete psychopath. So, he's a demon. So, who barely speaks and just is pissed off all the time, carries a sharpened railroad spike with him everywhere he goes, jams it into the breakfast table for no fucking reason. He's a lunatic. So,
yeah. Well, and there's a lot of politics that goes on. If you've got all of these guys who were beaten by your father and like you start being friends with this guy or that guy and all of them have a million connections this way or that way, I'm just sure there's so much politics for Youngjun as well. By being friends with this guy probably tangles up all sorts of, inter-tong threads or whatever.
But by the same token, the man's a life raft to him because he has no connections, and the guy's only going to be potentially only loyal to him.
Bingo. Yeah, that is a huge one. So I really just enjoyed them just sitting there and talking. And like you said, yeah, Youngjun didn't get any favors from his father when he was getting him in. He got the crap kicked out of him. So he's like, hey, man, I know you're not feeling good. Here's the way it works. And it's clear that Assam has been a pretty poor guy in China and also living kind of the quasi-monk life in China because he really gets whammed by that opium.
Yeah, he is. I don't know how prevalent opium smoking was in China because, there was a lot of negative connotation with it due to all the opium wars and the constant rebellions, which a lot of which had to do with opium tariffs and all that. So I don't. It probably was the same as the temperance movement in the United States, where you really had to take a hard line one way or the other.
Yeah. The Chinese did get very anti-opium there for a while just because it had a lot to do with, hey, our country is all of the silver of this country and our morals are being drained away by these foreigners. And so while opium had been a part of Chinese culture for a really long time in sort of a low-key way, it got completely pumped up there.
Yeah, with the rebellion and the imperialism, it got very bad. They basically had an opium crisis like we have an opioid crisis like we do in the United States now.
Yeah, because it was being pushed in exactly the same way for exactly the same profit motives.
Yeah, it's just turnabout's fair play, I guess.
But I enjoyed that scene both for what was going on there and a reminder that like cigarettes are totally a thing in the U.S. That's a technology that's becoming very big. So Assam's like, woo, this really hit me hard. I got to go walk it off. And so we get a really nice scene between Mai Ling and Wang Chao in his weapons storeroom.
Yeah, that was cool. We got a little steampunk action. And you know what? One thing we failed to mention in the last episode, which I do want to bring up because there is a recurring LGBTQ theme that goes through this show, is we missed Mai Ling is in a same-sex relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And we will find out she's not the only one that has, according to, 19th century propriety morals or whatever, she's not the only one with out of bounds tastes.
No, but I think that was still it was still a very new concept. The very idea of homosexuality was brand new at this point. So
It's so much more complicated than that. Different people identifying as a gender or a gender role different from what they were born to is something that rises and falls in all countries around the world. I don't know as much about what went on in China, again, because assigning people to matching sex and gender roles was very important for sort of the orderly society that they were looking for. And when you have things that are a little bit fuzzy and gray on the edges, that makes putting everybody in a box much harder. But I do know that in Europe, during different periods, those lines became much fuzzier, and it was sort of like whatever kind of job you ended up taking on, if you were competent, then you just were assumed to have that role. And whether you were a man or a woman holding down that role, it's like, well, are you good at this? Well, then, whatever. You are a sword instructor, and whether you're a man or a woman doesn't matter. You have this role in this household. You have this role within our religion, whatever. Making sure the role and the sex at birth matched up. It's come and gone in waves. And the 19th century, the idea of this very muscular Christianity that we've got going on in America and in England. Again, we want to assign people to boxes, and you can't let things get fuzzy around the edges. So, yes, it was a challenging notion at the time. Whether or not it was new,
well, the very term homosexual, giving those labels to people was new insofar as I understood it. I thought that was an outgrowth of the Victorian interest in science.
Oh yeah, giving the labels, absolutely.
And in particular, what was it called? The casual science that they had. It was not coffee shop. Salon science, something like that.
Oh, well, yeah, there'd definitely be the salons. There would be the coffee shop university where people would come into coffee shops and talk about stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of salon. But you're absolutely right that giving them these labels of homosexuality.
Yeah, it was really pseudoscience, I think. And
oh, yeah.
yeah. And even the labels themselves, because at the time, basically, if you were a sailor, you were a homosexual. If you were a cowboy, you were a homosexual by the standards of right wing now. Good God, if you went by the standards of if you have ever held hands with a man or kissed a man on the mouth, every single person prior to 1875 was probably a homosexual by those standards.
In fact, same-sex relationships weren't such the big deal. It was which role you held in the same-sex relationship. And so it was like, oh yeah, sure, if you were the younger guy and you were with an older man, if you were the bottom partner in that relationship, then, well, of course, that's what the younger person does. But if you got into people of equal age, then it was sort of humiliating if you were the bottom partner.
That's interesting. I guess that's the Greek rape sexuality coming forward. That just had to do with who was fucking whom. Well, that's sex.
Yeah, it gets... Again, it gets really complicated, and just as complicated as humans are. But you're absolutely right. This need to sort of start to apply labels and say, you go here, that makes you a good person, that makes you a bad person. Yeah, that's very muscular Christianity, very Victorian of them.
Yeah, but when in that scene where she was, I don't remember which man it was, asked if she wanted some company of my laying, and she was like, no, I have company. And she pointed to the woman who was laying in bed, and he was like, oh, and he just shrugged his shoulders and peeled off. He just dipped. It wasn't a big deal. He wasn't like, you're going to be with a woman. Don't you need a penis? And no, he just bailed. Oh, you got this under control? All right. Tip the cap to you. Enjoy.
And I think that's also an acknowledgement of her power as well. It's just like, what am I going to say to this person can have me totally freaking killed?
That's true. And it is a boss move to be like, no, I already got a bitch here. I don't need you. Yeah, I'm the boss. I got women.
Again, she's just, I feel like almost every single time Mei-ling is on screen, she does something where, she just displays power one more time in one more new way.
Yeah, she is. I mean, well, it seems that that's something that she has grown up as. It's almost a defense mechanism. And when she goes to send Assam off again, she kind of intimates that like she's the one who's been running shit, and she has to keep hold of her power, or else they're all doomed.
Oh, yeah.
So her power must be maintained at all costs.
Yeah, when we get to the end, I want to delve into that a little bit more. But let us not skip over Mai Ling's desire to meet with the Feng Hai, because she's like, well, you can't just go picking fighters up off the street because they're no good.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes, and that's where we actually see highbinders. So they keep calling all the Chinese highbinders, but in reality, the highbinders are the Qing or people wearing a Manchu haircut, and that's who. So I was kind of thinking when he described these people, these are the people we built the wall to keep out, and you automatically go to Mongols and Huns, but it's actually the Jurchen or the Manchu that he's thinking of, the people of Manchuria, and so that's who is in this scene, and that's where we get to see the food I love those spoons so much, the porcelain spoons you eat.
Oh yeah.
I love that soup, the miso soup, and I love the spoon, I love the bowl, everything about it is amazing.
But before we get to the deadly dinner scene, first we get to find out a little something extra about Mayor Samuel Blake.
That's right.
And this was just...
Oh, and we skipped over entirely the conversation between Mai Ling and when he's showing her the awesome sleeve gun.
Yes. Oh, the Derringer. That was sweet. Where he's like, here you go, pretty lady. Here's a little gun to protect you. And, and that is a classical, like, Derringer that you'd keep up your sleeve and then you'd, like, flick with your arm muscle to drop it in your hand. And she just does that like a boss.
It's a very Chinese thing to do, too. Shih Tzus, I think, were bred specifically for people to hold up their sleeves and then throw the dogs at people to attack them.
Oh, see, I was always told that the Shih Tzus were they started out as hand warmers, basically. The dogs in your sleeve, yes, but if you've ever seen the Chinese buildings that royalty had to spend a lot of time in, they're just like these single-walled or double-walled wooden buildings, and they just had braziers kind of around them to keep them warm, and you had to sit there for hours and hours doing these stupid audiences, and you're freezing your ass off, and so you have dogs in your sleeve, keep yourself warm. So yeah, sure, maybe some of them were bred as attack dogs, but I also know that they were also heating pads.
I like to imagine people firing Derringers. They got dogs just I like my attack Shih Tzu plan. I think it's way more fun than your idea. I'm sticking with it.
Why not both?
They make way better hand warmers than they do attack dogs. I don't know what they're going to attack. They could definitely maul a squirrel.
So did you ever watch the cartoon The Tick, written by Ben Edlund?
I've seen a couple of episodes. I haven't watched a ton of it, though.
Okay, anyway, there's one episode where they go to a superhero club, and there's one woman there who has a poodle gun, and it just shoots poodles at people.
Attack poodles.
Exactly. So
that's amazing.
So yeah, you're not the only one who had that idea.
That was a really dope steampunk Derringer, though, and I see where you're coming from on the, hey, little lady, you need this. But to me, that was a dope Derringer that he was like, she's going to love this. She wears big sleeves. She likes killing people like when they have no idea it's coming. This is for her. To me, he was just excited to show her this gun.
Okay, I sort of thought also the way he was doing it, it's like, okay, now I'm going to have to show you how to do it. And she was like, I already know how.
Oh, she was such a badass with that thing. Just chink, and she knew exactly what was up.
Oh yeah, it was a great scene. She is so good with weapons. I love it. And Wang Chao's just like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to buy your nifty gun. I want you as your role as sort of middleman.
Yes.
We'd already seen Wang Chao sort of working as being this middleman, somebody who can kind of go anywhere. And so the fact that he hangs out in Atoy's brothel and is buds with her, that he gets bounties for bringing fighters to the Hop Way, but now Mai Ling, who's like on the opposite side, also comes to him to do deals. I was like, okay, he really is the middle guy.
I think that calling him the middle guy is doing him a disservice. He's like the cog that all the spokes come out of. Without him, this show cannot exist.
Oh, okay. When I mean the middle guy, I sort of mean like he's the spider at the center of the web.
Oh, yeah. So we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he is literally, and he is acting. My God, Hoon Lee is his name, and this man can act. Just the way he changes his tone of voice and his demeanor from one scene to the next, and just conveys such a velvety smoothness and an utter calm. I mean, the man's voice is like perfectly brown butter. It's amazing. It's so good.
In fact, when I was first starting watching the show, the way he spoke to Assam when he brought him into Hapway, the way he spoke to Hapway, the way he spoke to Atoy, it took me a while to realize this was the same guy because he is such a great chameleon.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
And he does a great job of modulating his voice for what level of power he's talking to.
Yes.
He knows his place in the ladder. And I guess that's why I also think of him as the middle guy. Like, he really sees the power structure around him. I don't think he wants to be in charge. He likes to be the guy in the middle, pulling strings in all these different directions.
I think he also, because he's been through so much, it seems like he knows he is just a ship being tossed on the sea. He's not trying to grab the rudder. He's not trying to hoist the sails. He is just like, I'm going to keep bailing and see if I can eat today. And see, he seems like a man who is trying to position himself to succeed in all things.
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of like the storm is coming. Some people tie their ship up to the dock and other people take their ships out to sea because they're like, boats are made to float. It's going to go float on the ocean. And yeah, Wang Chao is definitely that guy.
Yep. And he just pitches up on whatever shore he's at. And he's like, all right, I'm going to fit in here. And he does. And this is another place where this show is an amazing just guide, I feel like, to people that maybe we should all take, because I'm bad at that. I'm a bull in a china shop. So I could stand to learn from Wang Chao about how to adapt better to my situations.
Speaking of people who aren't adapting quite so well, we've got Buckley. And so he's told Flanagan, like, go in, mess up some stuff in Chinatown. And so he's like, hey, Mayor Blake, I've got a thing for you. Mayor Blake, where are you? And his secretary, she says, oh yeah, he's in
Yeah. Where, and I didn't pick up until, you see him face down on on a table with a lady holding something large.
Yeah, that was definitely something that normally arrives at people's doors in a plain brown wrapper.
It sure does.
So, yeah, we can see that the marriage between Mayor Blake and Penny Blake is not the meeting of true minds.
That probably would not have been made out of jade. That would be an expensive.
But again, this is Ah Toy.
Yeah.
She only has the best.
It was green, so I was like, the whole time I've been trying to figure out what it was made of.
I'm sure it was a lower quality one because it's not always on display.
It had to have been wood.
But if you've ever been to like the museums in China, especially the Forbidden City, there are big objects made out of jade.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, but that's just very expensive. It's an expensive material. And, yeah, I've been to the Sex Toy Museum in Prague, and they had a lot of wood. There was a lot of wood.
Oh, yeah. No, bamboo was definitely more common for the common people, but Ah Toy is not common. And so, yeah, they come in and they're busting things up and they're picking people up out of the opium couches. And
the guy has a great line, too, the cop, when he busts in, he's like, see if anyone can stand.
Yeah. But what you were saying, like, yeah, this is a nice place, and some of these guys, they're just chilling. I mean, like, clearly some of them were messed up, but it's like any other sort of drug taking establishment, from people sort of smoking up at a party or just at a tavern. Some people are going to be real chill and some people are going to go too far.
Nobody shows any signs of distress when the cops kick in the door and say everybody's under arrest. They're like, okay.
All right. Well, what is it, Tuesday? All right.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, they run people around, they grab a few people, and then Bill O'Hara is kicked upstairs. He's like, all right, go take care of the person in charge. And he's like, I hate the Chinatown beat. He walks upstairs, and Ah Toy is like, oh, you. I know about you. You don't really want to mess with my upstairs establishment with all the nice stuff. It's just a boarding house.
Yeah.
These are nice girls.
Yes, you don't want to bother them.
And I mean, she has his number so fast and just hands over the red envelope of money. An early New Year's gift.
Yeah, the red envelope is a big deal in China.
Yeah, that's sort of the way that you signal that you're giving money, whether to be burned in any sort of death offering or as just a birthday present, a New Year's gift, any other way that you're giving presents to someone. It's a signal.
Yeah, the Chinese are they're very, very money motivated. I think instead they don't even say Happy New Year. They say something like I hope you make money or something like that. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but yeah. So that red envelope, like when they probably have them on and about their persons all over the place.
Well, especially if you're somebody who knows that bribery is part of the game. Toys ready.
Yeah, when you got to pay off a cop here and a politician there, and yeah. Plus, it seems like she has spies and inside people everywhere.
Yeah.
So she's paying people off all over the place.
She and Wang Chao definitely get even though both of them work very well with the Hopway, we know Wang Chao's not Hopway, but I don't think she's exclusively Hopway either. Both of them are sort of like, no. We've got to sort of have our fingers in everybody's pies.
Yep. Yeah, it seems like she's a neutral party, frankly. Does it seem like she's controlled by the Hopway?
I think at first I thought she definitely favored them because that's where the Hopway go first.
I got the impression she was independent.
And then she gets pissed off when the Longzi get in there. But then, yeah, the more it went on, she's like, no rough stuff. But she did cut out that one girl's tongue for blabbing to the Longzi. So it might be that she leans towards Hopway, or she was just mad at the girl for, bringing business.
I think it was more like, I don't want any fucking trouble in my place, and you brought trouble into my place, and you also told our secrets to some people, and so snip, snip. And that's why they stopped the fighting in there. It's like every Old West gambling den or saloon, you had to surrender your weapons kind of thing.
Definitely. I like your interpretation. That makes a lot more sense, that she's an independent and just gets mad about people breaking the rules of neutrality.
Yeah, it's the same with Wang Chao when he gets well, I don't want to jump ahead, but when he gets mad at Mai Ling, it's the same exact thing. He wants to maintain his Switzerland status. He needs that Switzerland status. Without it, he can't operate.
Right. So O'Hara takes the money because, as we know, he clearly needs the money. He's got gambling debts and some kids. 5, right?
Yeah, and probably medical bills now.
Right. And Lee kind of goes all like goody two-shoes on him, and O'Hara's like, hey, dude, you're playing Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, but aren't there criminals in Savannah, Georgia? Why did you come all the way to San Francisco to be that gets paid off later when Lee doesn't want to get his picture taken, and we're like, ooh, dark secrets in the pretty boy's soul.
Yeah, well, we kind of alluded to it before, I think, that we talked about it in the last episode, that this was a time when you only had to move 5 miles,
right,
and you were an entirely new person. And this man fucked off across an entire country, so he's done. Like, he needed to be a new guy.
Right.
So now and he's such a goody two-shoes. Now it's kind of back to your original theory. Maybe he is the most evil man in this show. We don't know.
Yeah, but the fact that he's so pretty, just like, I've never not been suspicious of him, and I'm enjoying the fact that they're like, yeah, you should be suspicious. Very good. I feel rewarded. But anyways, we've got that trouble brewing down in Chinatown, and then Assam is following Jacob to his own source of trouble in what passes for a skyscraper in 19th century San Francisco.
Yes. Wow, that is a beautiful interior too, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a little ahistorical, but I'm like, oh yeah, who cares, whatever. But the thing that struck me, other than the bathtub and the chair, I'm like, okay, like, this is her retreat. I was trying to suss out what's going on.
Yeah, so we didn't say, but it's Penelope Blake's retreat. It's a building her husband owns.
Oh no, her father.
or her father owns, and it's just kind of her little
getaway.
What it's like her woman cave. I don't know, whatever you call the
That
female version of
that
a man
works
cave.
too, except it's on the top floor, and it's got all the glass windows, and everything's like these white draperies, so it's 1990s romance scene clearly. But
yeah, oh yeah, it's the dopest she shed anybody ever saw.
there you go. But the thing that struck me is
Even with a clawfoot tub for no reason in the middle of the damn room,
Right?
with paintings all around it, it didn't make any sense.
I was really trying to figure out what the hell was going on here. But the thing that struck me in all of this, like, what's going on? What are they doing here? Is so clearly she has invited him up there, and she greets him what is functionally a bathrobe for that time and place. She's wearing basically no undies.
No, because they got right to humping.
Well-
There was no disrobing. She just hiked up her skirts and it was on.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, like, there's no corset on underneath that. There's
Oh yeah, I had questions for you because I was like, how the hell did they get right to sex? You can't even do that now.
So first of all, the idea of wearing any sort of like underwear on your bottom is a pretty modern idea. Up until then, when women were wearing like those 14 layers of petticoats, they were going commando under all that.
Yeah, well, it would have been a sweaty time under there, so.
Well, and you think about, like, you've got this corset on where you can't really bend over. That's why, like, women had to either have slip-on shoes or somebody to put their shoes on for them. I can just, like, reach down to my foot or whatever. But if you had on that corset and it went over your hips, so you couldn't even really bend your hips. And so there are these things running around that look like giant gravy boats. Those were the original chamber pots. And so women would just like stand up and use them. And so a chamber pot, if you were a chambermaid, one of your jobs was emptying these suckers.
Was to hold.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that sucks all the way around. Nobody is having a good time in that situation. And just like, they were like, all right, so what you need, lady, is a back brace. And she's like, all right, why do I need a back brace? My back feels fine. He's like, no, because you're too fat. But we need a scaffolding back brace where could we make it like a prison? Could we have like a prison back brace? Let's do that. Did they lock? What the fuck was going on? I mean, it's better than breaking their feet and binding it into a V shape upside down, but barely. Just barely. So these women can't breathe. Their organs are squashed.
Yes, some of it is that bad, and that really sort of went on at the high status level, because really what was going on there is that property is passed through marriage and inheritance is through birth. So if you're in a very high status relationship, you need to make sure that the kid that you're passing all of your property onto is definitely yours. And when you decide only dudes can control property and women can't have any say over it, you got to get real crappy and angry about it. But if you were lower status, a lot of these crazy clothes weren't there.
Well, yeah, because they had to clean the house, and they couldn't clean the house or do the dishes or do the laundry or raise the kids if they were, walking jail.
Yeah, in their clothes prisons, exactly.
What a dumbass. Jesus, that's dumb.
Well, and the 19th century was very much about these status markers that proved that what you lived in, what you looked like, what you were wearing meant you literally could barely move enough to get around, much less do any work.
I'm starting to see, I'm just over here thinking, did Bill the Butcher cutting go far enough in his headbutting of Leo? I think not. I think that if I had been in that time, just walking down the street and headbutting everybody into a coma would have been the best thing I could have done.
Now, when women are angry about the way the patriarchy has treated them over the last couple hundred years, we know of what we speak. I mean, putting us in clothes where we can barely fucking move and walk, and we don't have any goddamn pockets anymore.
I've stolen my wife's jeans. The women's pocket situation it's shambles. It's a half pocket at best.
Right, because what would women need pockets for? We don't have keys because we never go out alone. We don't have any of our own money.
Well, you carry purses, I think, is the idea.
Well, it did become that, but there was definitely this this element of why would you need anything to take care of yourself when all you need to do is find the right man who will take care of you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you weren't allowed to drive a car, or I don't know if you were they allowed to drive carriages? Were there laws surrounding like there? I noticed those carriages had horse-drawn carriages had headlamps on them, which I didn't realize. But I know that carriage culture was a thing. Like car culture has been a thing since chariots, for real. Like all of that pimp my ride shit has been happening for 4,000 years at the very least.
Oh my God, you are so right. If not longer. Like you think how far back chariots go. But yeah, women used to be charioteers in different cultures. But by the time you're in America, because again, that's where my brain lives, it was all stable boys. There were no stable girls.
So that's why she had to have this bat cave, this lady bat cave, where she could practice her art but never show it to anyone. And she was a great artist, but of course, and that was true to history, that she painted portraits of herself in the mirror. So all of her nudes were of herself, which was cool. She was letting Assam see her nudes, which was a scandal. I don't know if you noticed that, but he was looking at her nudes when he walked in because she had all these paintings of herself up, and they could only have been of herself because she is locked in this lady cave by herself. But that is how women artists used to always do it. They didn't have any female subjects to work for or to work with in like the ancient old Italy and things like that, which is why you have such manly looking women and like Michelangelo's paintings and things like that. Like all these women have big ass arms and Adam's apples. It's because those were dudes with women's faces painted on them.
Oh, if you look at art from like the 15th century to sometime in the 19th century, the places the boobs are put on these models sometimes is hilarious. These dudes literally do not know where women's boobs are.
Well, they were never allowed to paint them or look at them without their clothes on. I mean, Jesus, even when Assam and Penelope get down to it, she's wearing what looks like more clothes than I've ever even tried to get off a person before having sex. On our wedding night, neither of my wives, like my wife or my ex-wife, neither of them wore that many clothes. So, like, she was wearing a lot of clothes when they started having sex, which is why I was so surprised they got right down to it. She just plopped him on a chaise and jumped on him, and it was on.
Yeah, well, and I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh my God, she's wearing like practically nothing. But again, for 19th century, and so when I say she has no underwear,
she's wearing 3 dresses, but she has no underwear on underneath those 3 dresses.
But I can see from the way the clothes fit her, and again, this is one of the reasons this show is so awesome, is because of the way the clothes fit her, you can tell that she doesn't have on any of the 19th century structural undergarments that she would have on if she were going to go outside.
You could tell that. To me, it's a lady wearing 3 dresses.
Right. So if you look at that, and it is, and that's the other funny thing. And I was like, now, like, again, because of my whole thing about dress history and my interest in it, like, I could see immediately she's wearing a goddamn bathrobe. I was like, so are they doing that on purpose, or is it just meant to be like she feels relaxed and safe here? But as we find out really quick, no, she's wearing a goddamn bathrobe and she's going to use it that way. She just like opens the robe.
No, because she sent her manservant out to go get Assam so they could fuck. She wasn't beating around the bush.
No,
although it looked like it to me because I'm like, all right, she's having an art show while wearing 3 dresses. Is he going to put on a couple extra polo shirts? What's happening? Then you're like, oh my God, the scandal.
But again, if
only 3 dresses.
If you read it in sort of 19th century everything, like that was some serious foreplay, like letting him look at naked pictures of her first.
Oh, that was the foreplay right there. The nudes.
So
she was just like, here's what I got. You want to come get it?
and that was one of the funny things, because here we are in the 19th century painting from life, where artists were actually starting to paint prostitutes when they were painting women in their pictures. And so this is what, if you start to look at art at this point, especially the nudes, the women actually start to look like women now. I mean, yeah, some of them do have big fucking arms because they were working real hard, but it still looks like a woman with big muscles.
Yeah, it doesn't look like me with your head on it.
There you go. The one thing, so after like that all happened, the first time I saw him lays down and he's like, oh, ow, my ribs. And man, those ribs got better fast.
Yeah. Well, he's still whacked off his face on opium too. So
Sure.
Yeah, I
and
imagine
he's not making great decisions because Jacob's like, you could have just told me to fuck off. I wouldn't get in trouble.
Yeah, Jacob told him, he was like, you're going to get yourself killed.
Yes, he did.
Don't follow me. Like, I was sent to come get you, but I'm telling you not to follow me. You're being a dumbass. And he was like, yep, I'm being a dumbass. Let's go.
But sort of like Leo in Gangs of New York, he's being a 19-year-old idiot or maybe, a 22-year-old idiot. And he just sort of, follows his hormones and that's that. But you know who does get himself killed? Now we get to your favorite scene.
Oh, this was so good. So... it's Mai Ling goes in to see the Fong Hai, and they are just what you would expect, like a Mongol mob boss to be like. He's this huge dude, and he's hunched over, and he's just scarfing his food down while Mai Ling is sitting across from him, just daintily sipping her soup, with the perfect... Not showing any disgust at how this man's eating, when at one point he just reaches forward with, he had to do that barbarian thing. Grabs it. There's a whole fish on the plate in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
He just grabs like a handful of a whole fish and just stuffs it into his mouth and then starts slurping his soup again.
Oh, it was beautiful. And
it was great.
I was looking at this whole thing, and after Mai Ling had been to Wang Chao, it's like, hey, I need to set up a meet with this other gang. And then they end up at this like beautiful table of food. I'm like, this is the most Godfather-y dinner scene I've ever seen. Like, somebody's gonna die. Somebody's gonna die.
So she's sitting there, and she starts speaking to him, and then he just cuts her off and says something like, this bitch won't shut up, or something like that to one of his underlings, who doesn't say anything, just sits there stone cold, and you don't have any idea that when Mai Ling intimates that she's already poisoned this man, then his second just jumps up and starts hacking everybody else to pieces. And I was like, oh, that's why that man showed no facial expression when the other guy was talking trash.
Oh, yeah, because he didn't want to, he was doing the, I'm a horse rider warrior of the plains, and, I don't have to talk to no woman, which again showed, like, what an idiot and how he deserved to die, because if you know anything about any of these horse rider cultures in Asia, they were typically matriarchal societies. Women had tons of power.
Or they were egalitarian. But it was one of the reasons why the Chinese looked down on the Jurchen and the Mongols, was because they let their women lead armies and they let their women own things and act like men. And when the Jurchen took over China and instituted the Qing dynasty, they didn't allow their women to have their feet broken. So foot binding was not allowed among the elite in the Qing society.
Yeah, wow. The Chinese did not take well to that. Wait. The dudes have to have a special hairstyle, but the women get to walk around again? I'm not cool with that.
So then they just amped up all their idiocy, and the middle class started breaking the women's feet.
Yeah.
And copying the nobility, because they wanted to be the new nobility, since a lot of them have been killed by the Qing and replaced.
Oh, yeah. And that's not unique to the Chinese. The middle class is aping the morals or the styles of the upper classes, especially when they go out of style. That's like a super common thing.
It's crazy that it in the past only made women's lives worse, immeasurably worse.
Hear. And dudes are like, I have to start thinking of everybody as a person. I think that's very tiring. I don't want to do that. Yeah, that exhausts me. But luckily that fat man would not be exhausted anymore, because Mai Ling poisoned him, and he died with blood squirting out of his eyes as all of his buddies were hacked to pieces by his second in command. Yes.
That was a hostile takeover for the books. It was beautiful.
Oh, and the way they just dump him off the table and then set the table
so
back
he collapses
up,
he collapses forward onto the table, and one of the underlings just picks up the table by the side and dumps his corpse and all the food onto the floor, and then sets the table back down.
And he's like, so I hear you have a proposition for me. That was the most savage
Everybody
thing.
was stone cold in that scene.
That was beautiful. And I have to say, I super enjoyed the food because it was a super plausible Chinese menu. You were complaining last episode that you're like, I haven't seen any stew yet. And I was sort of thinking, I'm like, who have we seen eating? And we haven't really seen Americans eating yet.
Yeah, we did see, we saw O'Leary eating, and he was eating a steak.
Oh, right.
And I think we saw...
And we've seen breakfast, but again, Leary eating a steak, he's top dog. So he's not going to eat stew. He's going to eat cuts of meat.
Okay.
Yeah, but the Chinese food was beautiful and plausible. The dishes that they were using were like spot on, the sort of like export porcelain that you would be able to pick up in San Francisco. The fact that they had meat, they had multiple kinds of meat. They had those big fucking prawns, which I was like, those are gorgeous. The way they did the whole fish with like the chopped vegetable and herb sauce on top, that was bang on.
That's still authentic to right now. You go into a Chinese restaurant in Beijing, and that is being served on half the tables.
And that's what you would have found in the 19th century as well. I mean, a lot of things of these like very classic preparations. It hasn't changed at all, and there's no reason it should because it's delicious. No.
Yeah.
The one fun thing, and I couldn't 100% identify it, is the little teeny bodies on the skewers that he was going crunch, crunch, crunch on. I wasn't entirely sure whether that was some sort of insect or those were tiny birds, and either one's plausible.
Yeah, I have no idea. That one I couldn't tell. I didn't understand what the crunching was, so I was just...
Yeah, so if it was tiny birds, they would have just left the bones in there and they would have like fried them, and that's fine. Like that is plausibly something that somebody would have eaten. On the other hand, there are a couple of different types of insects that would have been fried and served as crunch, weird. Crunch, like, crunch that way.
I guess chicken flavored popcorn basically is what you're getting with a fried bird.
Yeah. Yeah, and that wasn't only the Chinese. I mean, this was done all over the world. It's done in Africa. It was done in Europe. I mean, the whole thing with the ortolan and like all of these, because people would go out into the fields. They'd set up nets. They would just catch whatever birds were kind of flying around the field.
Oh, yeah. Fried crickets are a big thing in Southeast Asia. I'm sure they were eating a lot of that.
So again, I don't know which it was. Yeah. Either is plausible. It totally makes sense. The only place that was possibly off was the beans that they were using in that scene. And now I'm just being a jerk.
Now you're nitpicking?
Yeah, but it's
That's
fun.
Right.
They were just using regular old standard.
This isn't a banana type scenario. We don't have to write a letter.
Nobody has to write a letter. It was just like regular old green beans, and what they would have used at that time would have been long beans, like those beans that you can find that are like 2 feet long or 3 feet long.
There are beans that are 3 feet long?
Yeah. It's a relative. Well, they're a relative of like black-eyed peas.
I love the way you say this like everybody knows this. Where the hell do you find a bean that's 3 feet long?
Well, okay, it's not like the bean, like you think about green beans, right? The pod can be like 3 inches long or it can be 6 inches long. There's a relative of the black-eyed pea that's literally called long bean, and the pod, instead of just being like 6 inches long, can be 2 or 3 feet long. If you go to...
That is crazy. I've never heard of such a thing. That's wild.
You don't shop in the Asian markets in Seattle, Jamie. I can tell.
No, I don't. I've never been to Seattle.
And they're actually becoming a little less common even here, just because now you have green beans that are like 6 or 8 inches long, and people are like, why do I go to all the trouble to get a long bean? Because it's kind of a pain. But they're out there.
I love green beans.
Yeah.
I think green beans are one of my favorite vegetables. Kongxing sai is my favorite vegetable. You can't get it anywhere, at least around here. But it is similar to spinach. And in China, they always prepare it with it's basically just like you would do sauteed spinach with a ton of garlic and oil. And it's so delicious.
You might be able to find it these days. What you can find around is amazing. I know that I'm starting to see something called water spinach, which is a certain kind of sweet potato leaf that is really, really common and prepared that way. So who knows?
I just saw gooseberries in the grocery store yesterday. I've never even seen. They look like little yellow tomatoes. I've never even heard of them before. I've probably heard of them before, but I don't even think. Maybe I heard of them on a candy and thought it was just made up. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, because seriously, gooseberry, haha, like, yeah.
Yeah. Are they good? I'm not a huge fruit guy, but I love strawberries and
Okay, yeah, they're
blueberries.
tart. And so,
Oh, then I will love them. I love
yeah,
tarts.
they're in the same family as tomatillos.
It looks like a tomatillo. I mean, it looks exactly like a tomatillo.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, so one thing in England is like when somebody was being kind of the pilly person in a group of friends, the one, I don't want to do anything, people would say to that person, don't be such a gooseberry.
Oh, sweet. Well, I eat limes piece by piece, so
Yeah.
I will enjoy a gooseberry then.
Yeah, so gooseberries, they are a European, I think they're European, though they might have come from China because a lot of stuff was making their way into English gardens at that
I
point.
feel like it's a Northern Europe thing like lingonberries.
Yeah, but it is sort of a tomatillo type relative, and it typically has a very tart flavor. Gooseberry jam was something everybody really loved, and they even liked putting it on their meat because it would have this tart and sweet flavor that went really well with stuff like pork and goose and stuff like that.
Huh. Interesting. It's in the currants family.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, awesome food, savage scene. And because I had to like go back and keep looking at the food, watching him just get dumped off the table, that was fun.
He was such a shithead, too. It was nice to see his body treated with that kind of disrespect.
Well, yeah, and he was definitely I mean, you talk about ethical gang leaders. He was clearly the guy who got to be the head of the gang because he just like killed the most people.
Yeah.
And you could tell his underlings under him was like, you're just running this like a shithead and you're just killing everybody who makes you mad. This is no way to run a successful gang.
Yeah, and this lady is rich, and she's trying to talk to you, and you're acting like an asshole.
Exactly. And so that's why the second in command is like, I can do this better. All right, let's talk.
I had the feeling she paid him off beforehand, because like I was saying, that she has the red envelopes handy at all times. She's ready.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She's got a red envelope ready for Assam right after that.
No,
She's like,
see,
yo,
this is my Ling.
kick bricks.
Oh, yeah. But it was really funny. Wong Chow's comment. He's like, look, if I set up a meeting and somebody doesn't come out alive, like that's going to hurt my rep. And my Ling gets mad at him. And he's like, well, I mean, I would have charged them more.
Yeah.
Or charged you more for that.
Yeah, because they asked him, well, would you have done it? And he was like, well, yeah, but I would have charged you more.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that was just like humor in the moment and how much of that was sort of walking back his irritation earlier. Because he's like, whoa, I can't make my Ling mad either.
Yeah, well, but he still has to assert himself. You know, he has to make the protest.
Right.
For propriety's sake, if nothing else.
Yeah. Wong Chow is sort of worried about his name on the streets, and then the police department and Mayor Blake, they're thinking about their name on the streets, so it's time to bring in the newspaper men.
Yes, the yellow journalism to the rescue.
Oh, yeah. The camera and the way they did the whole photo, and he's like yelling at them to stay still. I mean, the photo scene was so cool. The only part...
It's a bunch of cops posing over a Chinese person who's on his knees, hanging his head with like a sign around his neck in Chinese. And the one cop, O'Hara, has been beaten senseless and he's all lumped up.
Yeah.
And his boss is pissed off at him visibly for being lumped up. And so everybody's posing real hard, but then it was fun the way they took the picture. Was that accurate?
That would have been something that they totally would have staged. The only thing that they would have done differently is they probably would have made them go outside to do it, but it didn't make sense for the story because you needed as much light as possible on these guys just for the silver plates to work.
So the way they took the picture was they just exposed the camera lens they take the camera cover off rather than clicking a button. They just take the lens cover off.
And then you could see him holding his watch and like counting the seconds. And so this is why when you look in old photographs, you'll see people like will have these like nobody smiles in these photographs because you just like let your face hang. But quite often people's eyes will be all fuzzy. And that's because they were blinking.
Ah.
Yeah, just pulling the cover off and then putting the cover back on. Like, that was 100% accurate. It didn't make sense for the story to, like, make everybody troop outside so they could, like, stand in the sun.
So was that a daguerreotype then?
No, that would have been a wet silver plate. Daguerreotypes is where you put the acid onto a metal plate. And by the time we're in the late 19th century, you have silver embedded in gelatin on a glass plate.
Oh, okay. I thought daguerreotypes were silver as well.
Oh, silver is definitely involved. It's just that the suspending the silver in gelatin. And so you can, whereas the daguerreotypes is going onto metal, and
Okay.
that's a much sort of
Oh, so this is an intermediary step to photography because they're printing it onto the beginnings of film.
right, yeah, making that gelatin suspension is sort of that middle thing, and that's another thing that
It's like the reel to reel before the cassette.
right,
Kind of.
film stock is another thing made from wood cellulose.
Okay.
Eventually is where you get, which is why film stock is flammable.
Ah, highly flammable, yes.
Yeah, because we'll get into cellulose later, but basically you've exploded the fibers in the wood to like be really big, and so they have a ton of surface area, which is why it burns, part of the reason why it burns so well. But yeah, the suspending the silver particles in a gelatin sheet is what's going on here on a glass plate.
All right, cool. So it's almost like framed to begin with because it's like on a piece of glass and...
Oh, no, you're still making the negative that you have to print.
Oh, okay.
Because where there's more light, it's going to turn the silver black. And so when you make the print onto paper, it goes the other way. So if you were shining at something that was really, really white, on the gelatin sheet, it will turn very black. And then when you print it back onto the photographic paper, it blocks the light. So actually the print on the paper, it turns white again, where it was really, really light.
Ah, all right. Interesting.
Yeah. But the whole thing of them, posing the dudes like that, and then the bit where he's holding up the guy's cue, his braid that he's just cut off.
Yeah.
That would have been a super typical pose.
Yeah, it looked like something you would... I mean, even in Tombstone and things like that, when you see them, they were all very contrived pose. But you wanted to look cool. I mean, you pose for a magazine cover, you're going to pose for this thing.
You're telling the Instagram generation that photographs are staged? Yeah, that is an awesome one there. And then once again, Richard Lee sort of pops himself out as like some overeducated weirdo because he says, hey, if you're cutting off their cues, you can't send them back to China because they'll be in trouble. And they're like, what do you know about everything, nerd boy?
Yeah. How about you shut up over there? Have another drink. Meanwhile, how the hell would a southerner from Georgia have any idea about Chinese culture?
There were a lot of things being written about the quote-unquote mysterious East. You had all of these guys that came back from the Opium War, and, they've had all these adventures, and so they're publishing different...
Oh, so they were writing pulp novels about the...
Either that
or that was before pulp. That was before pulp
Yeah, they weren't
novels.
writing... Again, the 1880s is just when you first start to get wood pulp paper. But no, people would be writing these travelogues and these journals, or what you would do...
Didn't Buffalo Bill have a very popular book at this time, I think?
Probably. He definitely had a show.
Okay, yeah.
But what people would do is they would go and they'd rent out halls, and they would have slides of different things, and they'd give lectures. So that was another way that this information was getting passed around.
Oh, okay, cool.
So instead of watching webinars or YouTube videos, you'd troop down to the local beer hall that they'd put a bunch of benches in, and you'd have a lantern slide show.
Oh, cool. Or that could have been with a mountebank or a snake oil salesman as one of their entertainments as well.
Exactly, yeah. So that's how somebody would know that. They would go to a lot of these talks, or they would read these journals of adventures, or maybe he just sat around in a bunch of bar rooms and listened to people bullshit. I don't know.
One thing that they haven't shown in a TV show or a film yet, to my knowledge, that I really would like to see is an old carnival, or because that was the primary source of, well, I mean, gambling was a primary source of entertainment in San Francisco, but just to see what the traveling shows were like, if somebody had the ability to recreate one, I would love to see it, because it seems like such an interesting thing.
That's part of the reason we should at some point review The Greatest Showman and P.T. Barnum, because I'm not sure how much of that they show, but they do acknowledge kind of how those shows ran.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of those performers performed in the circus as well, so it was probably very similar.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now we have the sideshow at the police station. We've got the word out on the streets. We've set the newspapers on the case to get the word about the evil Chinaman.
Yeah, and the mayor's kind of towed the line. He's kind of towed Buckley's line on the evil Chinaman thing.
Yeah. Oh, and that is where it comes through that, yes, Samuel Blake did come from money. He is like young June, that he comes from a powerful family already, and he didn't have to scrap up from the bottom.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I pegged him with his shiny face there.
You did. I had it wrong.
But yeah, so we end up this episode with Mai Ling and Assam facing down. And Mai Ling's like, it's going to be war, dude. And I didn't have you killed last time, but I will have you killed next time. And I don't want to. So get out of town, man.
Yep. Another red envelope. She gives him a ticket. And he's already been told he can't leave and that he's owned by Father June.
Right.
But she wants to put him on a ship. And even though he's been told the docks are being watched, so how could he get on a ship? But she's somehow figured out a way, I guess.
Oh, well, I'm like, come on, it's Mai Ling. She could get him on a boat if she really wanted to. And also, the boat she has him on is a mail steamer, like for the postal works, which would be a very different dock and a very different kind of boat than what he came over on.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. I mean, again, that was totally just a silly detail. But May is kind of explaining why, like, I am never going back to China. I could never go back to China. And they haven't been explicit about it, but I think, and I don't know how explicit they'll ever be, but the unsaid thing here is she is basically a runaway, despoiled concubine who, if she ever went back to China, the best she could be would be like a laundress. I mean, she is trash if she ever goes back to China.
Yeah, she says to him, I'm nothing there, you're nothing here.
Yeah, whereas he could go back and, you know, he has this whole lineage of coming out of one of the Shaolin monasteries. He's got people who can vouch for him and say, you know, I trained him for this long, he knows this, and he could go out and, you know, be a fighter or a strong dude. I mean, it's even said in the episode, hey, why did you come over here? You can fight with your skills in China, you didn't have to come here. But there is literally nothing back in China for Mai Ling, and I think Assam gets it finally.
Well, he also realizes that she is a boss. Like, he already knew she didn't need any saving, and he actually told somebody she was dead. What, like,
right.
The person I came to save is dead. That's replaced by a different person. Yeah, absolutely. And when he said that, I think he had the realization that the situation is totally different than he thought it was. He probably expected she was going to try to put him on a boat.
Yeah. And he just sort of walks out, and he's got all sorts of, I mean, yay for Assam. He totally fits in now. He has just as many problems as everybody else now.
That man has more problems. But again, like Buckley, they're mostly they're all problems of his own making. If he had stayed in China, he wouldn't have any of these problems.
That's true. He might have a few different ones.
Yeah, if he hadn't rushed to the aid of the, well, quote unquote eventually rushed to the aid of the quote unquote damsel in distress.
Yeah, that wouldn't have all started, but yeah. So here we are, and this was a great setup episode. You sort of see, okay, more power pieces are being shifted into place. This war is about to start. Alliances are being formed. What goes down next?
Well, isn't that where we end? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like at the end of this episode, all of these pieces have been put into place. So
yeah, it doesn't really leave you with a point of having any idea where the show's going to go. I don't know what the next episode's going to be. In the last one, at least we knew that, you know, we kind of had an idea where it was going. Now, you know, she wants him gone, and we don't know where he's going to go. So it's fun. And we didn't even see O'Leary in this episode. And I was so excited to see O'Leary because his constant harping on the fact that, you know, white people have been in this country so long and they own it and this and that. And I learned this week that He is wrong. The Chinese were they were on the West Coast. They were in Seattle at the very least 200 years before any Irishman got there.
Oh, yeah.
So, because they were there in 1587 with the Spanish. The Chinese sailors came, and a bunch of them settled in Seattle, and then a bunch of them settled in South America as well.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I found fascinating.
I have a whole thing in my food podcast, The History of American Food, where I really talk about the Portuguese were the ones who really started the spread of food culture around the globe, because they were taking things from China, they were taking things from Europe, they were taking things from West Africa, they were taking things from India. I mean, they are the ones who started the food. Oh, and the Spice Islands as well, the food globalization. But then again, the Chinese, were up to all sorts of crazy things as well.
So they're behind the fusion foods. Blame the Portuguese if you hate fusion foods. Although you should probably slap yourself in the face if you hate fusion foods.
Yeah, I was going to say, there is no chocolate ice cream without the Portuguese.
There's also no tempura without the Portuguese.
So if you hate fusion foods, you've just been eating the wrong ones.
Yes. And we wouldn't have many of the things. I mean, I like to hate on the Portuguese because they're easy to hate. But they haven't done a lot right. But what they did do right was spread food culture and kind of really start fusion food culture.
Yeah, and
they made it an obsessive thing, and I appreciate them for it.
Yeah, and there's some things that are fusion food that we don't even think of that way. But for example, like pancakes and maple syrup and bacon is a fusion food.
Tacos al pastor is a fusion food.
I can't wait till I get to tacos al pastor. Yes.
It's a mix of Turkish food and the indigenous foods.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will join again for episode 5 and see what happens to everybody now that everybody's standing on the edge of a cliff.
Everybody might die in the next episode.
All right.
Oh, so what do you have going on in your life, Greta?
Right now, I am on a research break as I've just finished up season 2 of my History of American Food podcast, and I'm starting to look at the logistics of war and how that affects food in a pre-mechanical, pre-industrial situation.
I will be interested. So I have really come to the realization that where we were taught that war has progressed technology in ways that it couldn't have progressed in peacetime, that is incorrect in such a way that it would take a year for me to explain it. But it's patently incorrect. So I'm interested to see what comes of your investigations with food culture, because with technology, war has set it back almost in every case.
I think sometimes where the technology progresses, it's because everybody's ass is over a barrel, and then you throw a lot of money at it to finally make the advances that you've been sitting on for a long time.
Yeah, but then they do it fast and bad.
Fast and bad.
And they forget why they're doing it, which is
fast and bad. That's American food right now.
You know what? Don't you besmirch the glory that is a McDonald's hamburger.
A McDonald's hamburger or a Subway sandwich is such a technological marvel. There's a lot behind it.
I'm not gonna support you on Subway. I don't find that to be.
I'm not saying it's good food, but you think about that.
It is a technological marvel
that has come together to make that possible is kind of miraculous. We just need to do it for better stuff, please.
Yes, and maybe with less ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, and that's sort of the next step, I think. When I get to the refrigerator and the freezer, it's pretty amazing. So what are you up to these days?
I am basically just doing my Instagram, and I've been writing constantly. This is where we need to dip back into the 19th century. I just need to buy like a 20-year-old who won't get off their phone so that they can, and just employ them to do my social media for me at all times. I'll pay them in food and lodging.
There you go. And your Plague of Strength at all your socials?
Yes. Plague of Strength at everything. plagueofstrength.com. Go there. Buy books.
And if I want to look up your books on Amazon, what name should I look under?
Jamie Lewis. And yeah, if you want an easy book to search for, it's 365 Days of Brutality. It is a year of workouts and recipes that you can use to get jacked. You can use them to get ripped. You can use them to get strong. I picked lifters from all around different sports, different strength sports, different martial arts, all kinds of different stuff. Females, males, people from around the world, because I was trying to mix it up a little bit.
Very cool.
And also, I've got a book called Bite Size History that gives great background and context for all of the martial arts and history stuff that you happen to be coming across. I'm putting them out in sections, and I've got part 1 is out on my website. It's available for digital download. It's only $20.
And that's at plagueofstrength.com?
Plagueofstrength.com, or you can go to Instagram at plagueofstrength, and you can click the link in my profile.
All right. We will see you next week for episode 5, a rugged sounding episode, The Blood and the Shit.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. We're on Instagram at PCG Podcast, and you can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. And you can find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.